Hello, all you AI curious folk, and welcome back to AI Ramblings, episode 51. I'm your host, Michael Parek, your human, all things AI ChatGPT. Let's get started on today's events and my take on these events. Number one, it's a carryover from yesterday's discussion. We were anticipating Meta, along with OpenAI and Anthropic, releasing their next big models. Well, Meta is officially out with Muse Spark, rolls off the tongue. This is the big closed model, captained by Meta's recent acquihire 9 months ago, Alexandr Wang of Scale AI fame. Mark Zuckerberg personally picked him. And this is what they have. It's a big model. It carries on the Meta LLM's large language model legacy from the Llama series, which stopped at 4. And this is the next big one. It was codenamed Avocado, and now it's called Muse Spark. It's going to be the basis of everything you see around AI, around Meta AI, when you're futzing around on Facebook, on Instagram, on WhatsApp, Messenger, etc., around the world. 3.5 billion people being given the opportunity to use Meta AI in all its glorious forms. It is mostly going to be pari passu to the things that are being offered by OpenAI, Anthropic at the base level, and also Google Gemini, which is already rolling out across the world's billions of users. The key difference to remember here relative to the debates that are going to go on around this model versus the other models, how do they compare on the benchmarks, etc. All of that is very interesting for the developers, the techies, the early adopters. For mainstream folk, the key thing to take away here, from my perspective, my take, is that this model, if done right, is going to be good enough for the billions of people on Meta services if they choose to use AI via those services. And that's going to be Mark, Alex, and Meta's key challenge. How do you get people to change their daily habits, get used to these services? That's an execution thing. They've built the technology, they'll improve the technology, they will figure out how to monetize the technology. And on that front, there is almost no one better than Meta, because they've consistently used AI technology and non-AI technology to build the best AI tools to give big advertisers, small advertisers, everyone in the middle, the ability to generate huge amounts of revenues for themselves and, of course, for Meta. Google is very good at that. Obviously, Amazon has gotten a lot better over the last few years. And OpenAI is also very focused on advertising. Also today, in a separate story, it broke that they've upped their numbers on what they expect from advertising. They're now expecting over $100 billion in revenues by 2030, up from $2.5 billion in some early experimentation today. And that's, again, preparation for the big mega AI IPOs that are expected from OpenAI, from Anthropic, and of course, Elon's SpaceX XAI around his birthday in June. I've written a lot about that. You can check it out on AI Reset to Zero. But the key part here with this Meta announcement is that this model should be good enough. And good enough is an important lesson to kind of remember across tech waves. As a former internet analyst at Goldman Sachs in the 90s, I saw this movie very vividly. AOL, which was an up-and-coming online service, literally captured the excitement, enthusiasm around the internet. And from 95 to the end of the century, AOL, from the millions of people coming online, the regular people, it was the internet. Everyone was excited about Netscape, the browser, etc., but that was the internet. Similarly, Netscape, the browser, was very exciting for the early adopters and the techies and so on. But for most people, it turned out Internet Explorer, a browser that Microsoft, Bill Gates personally led this, and I was there in the room when they launched this in front of investors, and it was made it free relative to Netscape. Again, Internet Explorer embedded into Windows that everyone had in their PCs was good enough. Didn't have all the bells and whistles of the Netscape browser at various times, but it was fine. as long as the product gives you good enough stuff, that is a key lesson to remember in technology from a business mass market adoption point of view. And that is something you want to keep in mind when you see this announcement and potentially the rest of the models that are coming from OpenAI, Anthropic, etc. Which takes us to our second topic today, which is OpenAI is following a little bit in the footsteps of Anthropic. I had a big post up yesterday, which I'll have in the show notes, the numbers and so on. But OpenAI is also getting ready to launch its Spud series of models. And it is going to be following in the footsteps of Anthropic's Mythos, which was announced yesterday with some fanfare. Both of these models are supposed to be steps above on benchmarks relative to the earlier models of Opus 4.6, which is the big model from Anthropic, and of course, GPT from OpenAI. But the key here is that both companies are basically saying, hey, these models are so advanced that there's a lot of cybersecurity issues to work out. So Anthropic yesterday had a big alliance initiative called Glasswing. OpenAI has similar types of initiative around its new model around cybersecurity. And they're using it as a way to just, I think both realistically, there are probably some issues that they do want to make sure the big companies are cooperating in terms of addressing around potential threats. But I think there's something else going on here. And the big one, I think, is both these companies are doing everything they can to scale up their AI infrastructure, data centers by the gobs. They're taking on gargantuan, extraordinary amounts of risk in terms of committing to huge amounts of data infrastructure. OpenAI has already talked about over $1 trillion. They scaled it down to 600-700 billion over the next few years. Anthropic is also committing for hundreds of billions of dollars ahead, and both companies are shooting for big IPOs this year, again, to finance this stuff. So that's the backdrop we have to keep in mind. Why is that important? Because my take on this is that they don't have enough compute, especially for these newer models that require huge amounts of more compute to deploy things like AI agents out there. That is 1,000x or more increase in compute per user per day, potentially, relative to the good old ChatGPT types of chatbot things that we've used for the last 3 years or so. This is a big leapfrog. So all of these companies, I think, are also gating their ramp and launch of these new models under the guise of cybersecurity. It's probably, there's a lot of cybersecurity stuff to do, but I think it's a good cover. And I think that is the key thing to keep in mind. They need to make sure they've got enough compute. The other thing they're also trying to figure out is pricing. The newer models, as I said, use huge amount of compute to generate the tokens. So for instance, the Mythos model that Anthropic announced yesterday, their sticker price right out the gate is 3 to 5 times bigger than the earlier Opus 4.6 model. These things cost more to deploy. The variable costs are just so high. And so one of the other things they're trying to do is figure out pricing models around this stuff. And that is going to be a big issue that they're dealing with, which brings us to topic 3 today, which is OpenAI, ChatGPT, also getting countered on the OpenClaw, their AI agent framework that they acquired just a few weeks ago with Peter Steinberger as the new AI agent czar at OpenAI. Well, Anthropic has its own answer. They literally kicked off OpenClaw from the Claude side of their business about a couple of weeks ago, to the consternation of a lot of millions of early developers, early adopters, and developers who use OpenClaw. But very quickly, yesterday they announced Claude managed agents, their own version of OpenClaw that has a lot more security, etc. But most important, and here's my key take here, which is that they are announcing variable pricing. You basically pay for what you use when you use these agents. And the key here is it totally gets away from the all-you-can-eat model, whether you're paying $20 a month or on the higher tiers, $200 a month for the Mac service. Yours truly does on Anthropic, on OpenAI. Every one of them has a $200 tier. Well, these new services of AI agents are basically going to be priced differently. It's a la carte. You basically pay for what you use, and the monthly costs are going to go in the hundreds and thousands of dollars. So that obviously is not a mainstream strategy. So we're going to have to wait over the next couple of years. All the stuff will come down in pricing, but in the meantime, the next immediate few months, especially ahead of IPOs, these companies have to manage the just crazy ramp of their compute costs, which is why when they roll out AI agents, they are getting away from the all-you-can-eat buffet pricing. And that is a very key thing to kind of take away in terms of what OpenAI and ChatGPT are doing, and everyone in the industry is likely going to follow. So watch this space. So those are my three items to discuss today. And I wanted to make sure we understood the broader context of these things. Number one, that the models, especially from the mainstream companies like Meta, even Google Gemini, etc., are good enough. Don't be fixated on, how does it compare to the top models from ChatGPT, Anthropic, etc. Number two, that the cybersecurity issues that these companies are bringing up is covered to gate the compute ramp and the pricing ramps of these things. And number three, the pricing is moving away from subscription oriented prices, which, by the way, will be maintained. But if you want to use all these AI agents to be constantly doing things for you on your computers 24/7, like I do on a couple of machines around here, it's going to cost. It's, for someone like me who's been online since the 80s, it brings back the days of CompuServe, which was owned by H&R Block. Some of you may be old enough to remember that. My bills back then were in the hundreds of dollars a month to go online and use all the resources before AOL came along with flat pricing and so on. But those are old history lessons. But I just want to say, history obviously always generally rhymes, and we're seeing that today with AI services. So I want to basically now just switch to the gadget side of the discussion. As you know, one of the things I want to do on AI Ramblings going forward is to talk about AI and gadgets. And the theme I want to talk about is that, especially in the light of all of the memory issues, where memory shortages on computers and smartphones are causing the companies to basically give you less memory at higher prices. It is going to basically be an issue for all of the AI hardware companies that are trying to create all these gadgets over the next 2 or 3 years, inclusive of OpenAI with their Johnny Ive initiative, where they have a $6.5 billion acqui-hire with devices slated for the next 2 or 3 years. So I've written extensively about how I think Apple is really best positioned because they have one of the world's best supply chains. They've locked up big chunks of chips and memory for years ahead. And as a result, they're finally executing very well. And I've got detailed posts. You'll have the numbers in the show notes. But basically, these are going to allow Apple to create these amazing products like the Apple Neo. $600, $700 with double the storage memory, which is the one I'd recommend if you're looking at one of these. They're great for young people in your family, young and older people in your family who don't want the complexity, and much, much better in ease of use, especially on the software side against Windows. They're much quicker to set up. No advertising, no bloatware, no stickers. They're really great machines. I like the one in blue, but the green one is kind of cool as well. Not a product recommendation. None of this is sponsored by any of these companies. It's just me, my personal passion for these things. But the key point here is that the gadgets going forward are going to have less memory in terms of RAM and storage. So increasingly, the larger models, if they're going to do more work internally, they're going to use SLMs, small language models. Microsoft, Apple, Google, they're all focusing on just a combination of large and small models that work both on the device and in the cloud, doing things for users, especially with these AI agents and so on, hopefully bringing the cost down, as that we've talked about earlier. So the notion of gadgets and AI, one of the core things we want to watch going forward is the plethora of small language models that will be brought in as supporting cast along with the bigger models in the cloud. And companies like AOL, companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft in particular are very focused on this SLM with LLMs strategy. And so that is my gadget discussion for the week. I just wanted to end the discussion today with two questions from listeners and readers. Number one, we got a couple of good questions around, with all these new models, which one would I actually recommend and use? Well, as an early adopter, I basically use all of them. As I told you, I pay the top tier pricing for most of these things. I particularly like Perplexity, but that's early with their computer product and so on, which is AI agents and so on. But those are still higher end early adopter products. For most regular people, if you want to just try these things without paying an arm and a leg, I think Google Gemini is the best way to participate today. And Google Gemini in a few months is going to be incorporated into Apple's products, Siri, and so on, literally in a few months. And Google would get paid for the privilege. Again, I have written about this. We'll have the specific posts in the show notes. You can always go to, by the way, AI reset to zero and just Google these terms and find the post directly. They're pretty well linked. But in general, I would say the base products from Google and hopefully Meta, as they roll out Meta AI a little bit with more execution and UI UX types of elements, will be good enough type of products to look at. So that's my first question from people that I wanted to touch on. And then the second question that I'm getting is, who do I trust most on privacy and trust? Which is a great question. If I had to just rank these key providers today, obviously OpenAI and Anthropic are, for early adopters, are doing a lot around privacy and trust, especially Anthropic, which makes its brand around this relative to OpenAI. But if in terms of the three big ones that we've talked about, I would say Apple remains the front and center, but they have the most advanced AI models out there in their systems. And that'll change, as I said, with Google Gemini and other things that they're going to be working with. The second one I would say is Google. Now, remember, Google has an advertising business, obviously, but they're pretty careful in terms of making sure your data, especially as they really integrate with AI, their AI agent products through Gemini, into your personal data around Gmail and calendar and maps and all these other things. There is a higher level of focus on privacy and trust. The third one, which is I think is a distant third over there, is Meta. And this is where I think Mark Zuckerberg particularly has a lot of wood to chop on the privacy trust side of things, especially with AI agents. I think in general, anecdotally, we're already finding that regular users are already finding that these AI products are relatively creepy. That's why these smart glasses, which is the Ray-Ban ones from Meta, a lot of people, say, eek, I don't want to use these things with cameras on my face all the time. And people who are facing people with these glasses are also shirking away from cameras and so on and so forth. So there is a big trust and privacy issue around gadgets that I've talked about extensively in my post as well. Again, we'll have links in the show notes. But this is a big issue, and it's a great question from one of the readers. And I think that is the order that I'm focused on right now. And I spend a lot of time thinking about this. So we'll have updated answers on this as we go along. Okay, so AI curious folks, I want to thank you again for joining us for the second of our daily episodes of AI Ramblings. Thank you. Again, as usual, feedback, questions, comments, always welcome. And a like and subscribe is always appreciated. So until tomorrow, stay tuned and talk to you soon.